3 days between 28th and 30th March 2022, the sprawling federal capital city of Abuja, Nigeria, played host to development experts and delegates from across Africa, as well as local participants from across the country in a strategic continental capacity building workshop tagged African Union, African Peer Review Mechanism, APRM, Continental Capacity Building Workshop on Africa's Voluntary National Reviews (VNR) for the 2022 High-Level Political Forum HLPF on Sustainable Development and Domestication of Agenda 2063. The Continental Workshop aims to support national capacities of AU member states in preparations for the Voluntary National Reviews (VNRs) to be presented at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development HLPF in July 2022 to hold under the auspices of the United Nations Economic and Social Council (ECOSOC). It also offers a regional platform for the peer learning on best practices of the integration and implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063, domestication challenges at national and local levels, alongside forging monitoring and evaluation tools to report on both agendas in tandem. Speaking at the event, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibanjo, who was represented by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, reiterated Nigeria's commitment to the attainment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs), as well as African Union Agenda 2063, aimed at transforming lives in the continent.
Permit me to let you know that since the adoption of the AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Agenda 2030, the Nigerian government has embarked upon a process of domesticating these agendas at the national and subnational levels. Interestingly, the new National Development Plan, the Nigeria National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, has strategies that aim at achieving the targets set under each of these dual goal agendas, while the capabilities of policymakers are being strengthened to ensure their implementation in an integrated, coherent manner in order to facilitate an inclusive implementation process across all relevant stakeholders.
Vice President Oshibanjo, who reeled out various policies, programs, and initiatives of the Nigerian government aimed at achieving the SDGs and ameliorating the negative impact of COVID-19 on the nation's economy and the populace, also noted that the genesis of Agenda 2063 was the realization by the African leaders that there was a need to refocus and reprioritize Africa's agenda from the struggle against apartheid and the attainment of political independence for the continent. He added that Agenda 2063 is equally an arrangement that prioritizes inclusive, social, and economic development, continental and regional integration, democratic governance, peace, and security, among other issues.
The objective is to reposition Africa to become a dominant player in the global arena. I'm aware that the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, had remained cardinal to the attainment of robust economic cooperation among governments globally, particularly in realization of the Decade of Action for SDGs as defined by the United Nations. You will agree with me that the strategic partnerships embedded in the SDGs have availed Nigeria a huge implementation context due to its large population, landmass, and ethnic diversity.
Following the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, on 25th September 2015 and the subsequent commencement of the SDGs on the 1st of January 2016, member countries are required to voluntarily present national reviews to the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development under the auspices of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. The HLPF on Sustainable Development, established as the main United Nations platform on sustainable development and plays a central role in the follow-up and the review of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs at the global level. The follow-up and the review process encourages member states to conduct a voluntary country-led, country-driven, regular, and inclusive assessment of progress at national and sub-national levels called VNRs. These are to be undertaken universally by both developed and developing countries with the aim to facilitate the sharing of experiences, including successes, challenges, and lessons learned to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda while at the same time providing a platform for partnerships. The VNRs also seek to strengthen government's policies and institutions and mobilize multi-stakeholder support and partnerships to implement the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs.
Last year, the Secretary-General published our Common Agenda, which outlines a vision for the future of global cooperation founded on a more inclusive, networked, and effective multilateralism. Through our Common Agenda, we will intensify our efforts in the decade of action and push for the key transitions in energy, food, and digitalization to achieve a greener, safer, and more equitable world. In this effort, voluntary national and local reviews are essential tools, providing a clear picture of the state of play, identifying priorities for action, and accelerating progress on SDG implementation. They can support more integrated and evidence-based policy making, enhance coordination at different government levels, and serve as a tool for better data collection. In addition, the Local 2030 Coalition is leveraging the voluntary national review process to track and report SDG progress at the local level and to advocate for and invest in voluntary local reviews. Your efforts this week will benefit not just your own nations, but the whole continent by identifying solutions in the run-up to the high-level political forum in July and by building new partnerships to meet the SDGs by 2030.
The VNRs have increasingly become more evidence-based and more inclusive and have been broadening their reach to incorporate the work of local-level reviews through the voluntary and local reviews, which in turn are helping to domesticate the 2030 Agenda along with Agenda 2063. I am therefore excited that over the course of the next 2 days, this workshop will provide a regional platform for peer learning on best practices to integrate and implement the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063, as well as implementation of the principles for effective governance adopted by ECOSOC, the utilization of monitoring and evaluation tools, as well as data collection, harmonization, and institutional capacity building. The sharing of success stories and lessons learned will propel progress in Africa. It will help provide support for those countries who need it so that no country is left behind. I hope this meeting will also serve as a useful opportunity to enrich the VNRs of the countries presenting this year, 21 of which are African countries. I want to thank you all again for being a part of this workshop. I am certain its outcomes will enrich the preparatory process as well as we head towards the HLPF in July. It is a gathering such as this one that give momentum to efforts to gear national policies and strategies towards the integrated implementation of Agenda 2063 and 2030 Agenda so that we reach those furthest behind.
In her remarks, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orilokpe Adefolire, stated that Nigeria was among the first few countries that responded positively to the call and presented the first national reviews in July 2017, barely a year into the commencement of the SDGs. Nigeria also defied the COVID-19 challenges to present the second Voluntary National Review, VNR, in 2020.
It's glad news to say that Nigeria presented its first voluntary national review to the high-level political forum in July 2017. Nigeria's first voluntary national review outlined the institutional dimension for creating an enabling policy environment for the implementation of SDG through the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, 2017 to 2020. Similarly, in July 2020, Nigeria presented the second voluntary national review with specific focus on the critical issue of poverty, inclusive economy, which is Goal 1 and Goal 8, health and well-being, Goal 3, education, Goal 4, gender equality, Goal 5, and enabling environment for peace and unity, as well as security, which is Goal 16. Also, partnership for the goals.
The 2022 HLPF is scheduled to hold in July and will be organized under the theme Building Back Better from the Coronavirus Disease, COVID-19, while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The HLPF in 2022 will review in-depth Sustainable Development Goals 4 on quality education, Goal 5 on gender equality, Goal 14 on life below water, Goal 15 on life on land, and Goal 17 on partnerships for the goals. The forum will take into account the different and particular impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic across all sustainable development goals and the integrated, indivisible, and interlinked nature of the goals. At the 2022 HLPF, 46 countries will be presenting VNRs, with 22 African countries expected to present VNRs, including 7 countries expressing their wish to present their VNRs for the first time at the HLPF. Accordingly, the Continental Capacity Building Workshop was held to contribute to raising awareness on progress, gaps, and challenges towards an integrated and coherent approach to the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and discuss the issues with national focal points.
This year, as we heard, colleagues, around 21 African countries will present their VNRs, and this is a commendable number. I wish, therefore, to propose 3 key messages to our member states. The first one is that this platform will always open for all countries to learn and share experiences, not only on VNR preparations, but also on sharing experiences on what works and what didn't work regarding NDPs, monitoring and evaluation and enhancing statistical capacities of African countries. We are also delighted to welcome countries which are not part of the APRM family, but hopefully soon will be joining us as we call for universal accession to the APRM by 2023. The second key message is that as Africans, we need to align our efforts to represent our continent needs and challenges in a further structured way. Therefore, we suggested developing key messages to our colleagues in different countries as outcome of this workshop to be provided to the ECOSOC president. So it is your chance, Your Excellency, to provide inputs and recommendations on how your country can achieve both agendas while considering whole of government and whole of society approaches. We are ready to also support your discussions at the HLPF to ensure the voice of Africa is influential and reflecting our needs for multilateral and fair global system to offer more vaccine for our people, sustain more jobs for our youth, and guarantee inclusive rights for our women and girls. And lastly, is the role of the African Union and our regional economic communities is strategic to support your VNR and overall reporting on both agendas. The birth of Agenda 2063 took place in Addis Ababa in 2030 by our presidents. Our partnership with the United Nations remains a cornerstone to support national and subnational levels in each country to achieve both agendas. Through the APRM national structures, more effort shall be exerted to raise awareness on VNRs and VLRs and how our governance reviews are necessary for the exercise of this important implementation of these two agendas.
The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orilokpe Adefolire, explained that the event, which is a follow-up to similar ones held in Addis Ababa, Kigali, and Djibouti, forms part of efforts to fast-track the achievement of the SDGs and Agenda 2063 in African countries. She added that Nigeria has recorded significant progress in the implementation of the SDGs in many areas, including supporting the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, to prioritize and mainstream the SDGs in their medium and long-term development policies and plans.
This workshop, like previous workshops in Addis Ababa, Kigali, and Djibouti, it is not only apt, but timely as well considering the agenda and urgent need to fast-track the achievement of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal and Agenda 2063 in African countries. Discussion during this workshop will undoubtedly equip African countries with the tool to better mainstream the SDGs and the African Union Agenda 2063 into our policy, programs, and plans. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development envisions a present and a future that is economically sustainable, socially inclusive, and environmentally resilient. This vision is expressed through the framing of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets, and 230 key performance indicators. Taking this together, the SDG is a universal call to action to end poverty, safeguard our planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace, prosperity by the year 2030. Since this historic adoption, the government of Nigeria has continued to demonstrate commitment in overall implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, including the timely establishment of institutional framework at the national and sub-national level to guarantee effective implementation of these global goals. Indeed, in the last 5 years, we have worked closely with the United Nations Development Systems, our development partners, the private sectors, civil society organizations, and concerned citizens to strengthen the implementation capacity of all the levels of governance in Nigeria. Such strategic partnership and support demonstrate our collective commitment to the achievement of SDGs by year 2030. On overall implementation of SDG, Nigeria has significantly progressed in the following areas: the realignment of our national statistical system with the requirement of an indicator of SDGs, the domestication of Nigeria integrated SDG model, which is popularly known as ISDG model, the homegrown analytical tool for SDG-based development planning, supporting the 36 states of government at sub-national level and Federal Capital Territory, to prioritize and mainstream the SDG into their medium and long-term development policies and plans. Designing the implementation of Integration National Financing Framework, INFF, and the development of a coherent SDG implementation plan for this decade of action.
It could be recalled that the adoption and launch of AU Agenda 2063 preceded the post-2015 Development Agenda, later known as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was developed and negotiated at the global level. This provided an opportunity for Africa's perspective articulated in the Common African Position, CAP, on the post-2015 development agenda to be considered on the global stage as the basis for negotiations during the development of the post-2015 development agenda. The Common African Position contributed to the formulation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 SDGs. Since the adoption of the AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Agenda 2030, most countries in Africa have embarked upon a process of domesticating these agendas at the national and sub-national levels. States develop planning strategies that aim to achieve the targets set under each of the goals in both agendas. Member states across the continent have also been aligning their national development plans and strategies with the objectives of both agendas. Capacities of policymakers at the national and sub-national levels are being strengthened to ensure the implementation of both agendas is undertaken in an integrated and coherent manner, as well as facilitate coordination within sectors to ensure an inclusive implementation process.
Let me express my appreciation to His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, PCFR, who has given the necessary support for all the achievements that have been recorded so far. I also wish to specially commend my dear sister and Excellency, the Senior Special Assistant to the President and SDGs, and our team, as well as the relevant sector MDAs at both federal and state levels, who have contributed to the modest achievements and the milestones we have all accomplished together as a country. The government of President Muhammadu Buhari and the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning will continue to support the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063. Instructively, the recently approved and launched National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 aligns with the SDG goals and then the AU Agenda 2063. We have to ensure that the goals were mapped to the various technical working groups that worked on the development plan. The plans, as a matter of conscious effort, is comprehensive and have the capacity to accelerate the attainment of various regional and global agendas, including the AU Agenda 2063, ECOWAS Integration Agenda, and the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Recently, my ministry launched a modeling lab and economic intelligence desk, which is equipped with portfolios of macroeconomic models, namely macroeconomic planning models of the Nigerian economy, dynamic input-output model, the ISDG model, and the dynamic computable general equilibrium model of the Nigerian economy. In this regard, the collaboration between the SDG Office and the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning will result in beneficial outcomes. I have no doubt that this workshop will be motivating, enlivening, rewarding, and result-oriented, considering the intellectual and diverse experience of the participants.
In her remarks, the National Coordinator and Chief Executive of Nigerian Office of the African Union Development Agency, New Partnership for African Development and African Peer Review Mechanism, UDA-NEPAD APRM, Princess Gloria Akubundu, stated that Continental Capacity Building Workshop was intended for African countries to share experiences and learn from one another on the implementation of the UN's Agenda 2030 and the AU's Agenda 2063 and how best to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the populace.
And at the end of the day, this document or the outcome will be presented at the high-level political forum come June this year, 2022, at the United Nations. So what this means is that the leaders of Africa under African Peer Review Mechanism is extraying leadership, governance, opportunities, challenges, and global challenges that has affected Africa and a way possible to address them for effective leadership and growth in our continent.
The workshop had in attendance representatives from 22 African countries, heads of ministries, departments, and agencies in Nigeria. as well as the SDGs state focal persons, representatives from the 36 states, and the FCT. The 3-day Continental workshop was organized in collaboration with the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, OSSAP SDGs, led by Princess Adejoke Orilokpe Adefolere on behalf of the Government of Nigeria and the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UN DESA, and the Nigerian Office of the African Union Development Agency. New Partnership for African Development and African Peer Review Mechanism, UDA-NEPAD APRM, led by Princess Gloria Akobundu, with support from AU Commission, Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, United Nations Development Programme, UN Global Compact, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UN ECA, and other organizations.